had the My name is Erica Mortensen. I'm the Human Trafficking Unit Supervisor here at the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And again, just to make sure you are in the right place, we are attending the virtual Lunch and Learn hosted by Work Group 1. So for all of my Work Group 1 members that are on the call today, thank you guys so much for making today possible. Special Agent Griffith, thank you so much for joining us and being willing to speak with us today a little bit about your presentation as it pertains to CSEC and recruitment of children online. So again, just a gentle reminder for all members, all participants to please keep yourself on mute. We will be opening up the chat. It's currently open right now if you have any kind of outstanding issues. But that being said, we are going to let April roll through her presentation first and make sure that we give her the time that we need to ensure that she has all of her slides kind of gone through, and then we will look to the chat for those of you that have questions and open up the last kind of section or the last half of this meeting to allow for that Q&A. So as the presentation kind of comes to a close, please know that you can drop your questions into the chat, and we will kind of be reading them aloud and referring those questions to April so she can help to answer any questions that you guys have. If you do have any questions that we may need a little bit more clarifying on, I might ask you to come off mute just to explain or clarify the question in any way, but please just know that the chat is what we're going to be utilizing mostly for the Q&A during our first Lunch and Learn. So this is Work Group 1's first Lunch and Learn. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Work Group 1, or kind of any of their previous initiatives, Work Group 1 does focus on community awareness and education. This is our inaugural virtual Lunch and Learn, so we are happy that you all have decided to join us for our first ever kickoff. We are hoping to host future Lunch and Learns, really just kind of taking a deep dive look at a specific niche or sector of trafficking and making sure to bring a little bit of visibility. So as we mentioned kind of in the flyer and the emails that went out to promote this event, this will not be an HT 101. Again, we're going to be taking a look really at kind of some more of these specific sectors within the field and hoping to bring a little bit of visibility to them. Please know that at the end of the Lunch and Learn after today has commenced, then we will be sending all attendees a brief survey. It's just a very quick survey just to help the work group better understand maybe what are some ways that we can improve the event. Are there any things that we need to be mindful of moving forward? So just know that that might be hitting your email by the end of the day today. So please just take a few minutes after we wrap up to answer a couple of those questions, again, just to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to better improve the Lunch and Learns and be thoughtful about those requests in the future. So without further ado, I would like to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker. Special Agent April Griffith has been with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation for 14 years. She's currently part of the Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit and formerly as Crisis Intervention Teams Coordinator for the state of Georgia, where she trained local law enforcement officers in how to interact with those who suffer from mental illness, developmental disabilities, and addictive diseases. She currently conducts proactive and reactive investigations involving crimes against children on the internet and commercial sexual exploitation of children, including possession, distribution, manufacturing of child sexual abuse material, solicitation of minors via the internet, and the commercial sex trafficking of minors. Special Agent Griffith also serves as liaison representing the GBI for the Child Sexual Exploitation of Children Multidisciplinary Team, which meets once monthly to discuss resources and services for victims of CSEC in order to ensure victims are having their various needs met. April holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Psychology from the University of Georgia and a Master's of Science degree in Criminal Justice from Georgia State University. Special Agent Griffith has been a post-certified instructor since August of 2007 and regularly provides instruction in the areas of child abuse, human trafficking, sexual exploitation of children, and mental illness. So Carla and Alina, if we don't have any more kind of housekeeping things to take care of, we will go ahead and turn it over to you, April, and you can get us started.
All right, looks like I'm not muted, so everybody should be able to hear me, but let me know if you can't. So like Erica said, my name is April Griffith. I am with the GBI, and more specifically, I work in our Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit. Really the two main things that we work in this unit, at least on the agent side, is our cyber tips that we get from NCMEC, which I'm going to talk a little bit about today. So things like child sexual abuse material, online enticement of children, and then we also work the commercial sexual trafficking of children. Those are the two main things we work. We also have some other people in our unit that do various other things that we'll kind of get into. But like Erica said, we're kind of working off the assumption that you guys have a basic understanding of what human trafficking and what child sex trafficking looks like. And this is a little bit more deeper dive into what it looks like in terms of the trends right now that we're seeing in terms of the enticement and recruitment of children online. And we're going to kind of talk about how those have some similarities, but how they're also different in terms of whether or not they're trying to entice for or recruit for trafficking purposes, or whether they're trying to entice for other reasons. And again, some of that looks very similar in how it's done, but we're going to kind of talk about those similarities, but also how they look different as well. All right, and so just to give a little bit of background too on the Georgia ICAC Task Force, it's operated out of GBI's Child Exploitation and Computer Crimes Unit. The main goals are to detect, investigate, and prosecute. But essentially what we're working when we're in part of this task force is anything that is related to a juvenile and some sort of internet crime. So that's going to be instances of child pornography, domestic minor sex trafficking, and online enticement. We also have digital forensic investigators that will help forensically process digital evidence for law enforcement in the state of Georgia. We provide internet safety education to the citizens of Georgia. More specifically, we'll go into schools and do internet safety presentations for them to try and teach them and educate them on how to be safe when they're online. Because as we all know, pretty much every kid at some point now, pretty young, gets on the internet in some capacity. So we try to go in and teach them how to be safe when they're doing that. And that can, obviously be a little bit difficult sometimes because kids think they know everything. And we also have we're the federal ICAC grant holders at GBI. That just basically means we manage the money for the entire state. The GBI CAC unit structure, we're a statewide unit, so that means we cover all 159 counties out of our unit, which is different than most of our other units in the GBI. This is just a breakdown of what our unit looks like, who we have. We have 15 special agents. We have 7 digital forensic investigators. Those are the ones that do all the forensic processing of computers, phones, tablets, any sort of digital aspect of an investigation. They are especially trained to do that. So the Georgia ICAC program started in 2003. And this is just some background information about how much we receive each year to manage this. We currently have 240 or more local, state, federal law enforcement agencies, prosecutors' offices, and state agencies that are members of the Georgia ICAC Task Force. So although this program is housed in the GBI CAC unit, we're really just a really small part of the actual task force. The bigger part is all of our local agencies and federal and other state agencies that are part of the task force that are also doing the same work that we're doing. So essentially, basically every state has at least one ICAC task force. There are 61 across the entire United States. Some states have more than one when they're larger, like California and Florida. They have multiple ones, as well as Texas, obviously, because those states are so large. They break them up so that it's a little bit easier for them to handle the caseload that way. And the ICAC program was developed in response to the increasing number of children and teenagers using the internet, the proliferation of child pornography, and the heightened online activity by predators searching for unsupervised contact with underage victims. And we obviously know that that's a huge problem here in 2021. So how our task force generally operates, we receive reports that are called cyber tips from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Those tips are triaged and legal processes sent out to help us determine jurisdiction. Once legal compliance reveals the jurisdiction, then the tips are either assigned to an ICAC affiliate at a local or another state agency, or if there's no affiliate in that area, it's assigned to a GBI-SEAC agent. Those cases are then reviewed by local investigators or whoever it was assigned to, and they will work it and investigate it per their agency standards and policies. But we also provide ICAC training for all of our affiliates. So sort of a guidance on how to work the cases, but obviously they, still have to follow their agency policies and standards. So you guys probably are pretty familiar with NCMEC, established in 1984. They receive federal funding and private funding, and essentially they're like the clearinghouse for anything related to missing children, sexually exploited children, those types of things. We get all of our cyber tips that we work through NCMEC, and of course we always, we get all kinds of information from them. They also are the ones that hold the sort of main database that we use for child sexual abuse material, for any of them that have been seen before, as well as any of them that haven't, where we know who the victims are in those images or videos. So we work with them a lot. So what kind of reports do we actually get on these cyber tips? Obviously, child pornography or child sexual abuse material, online enticement of children for sexual acts, unsolicited obscene material sent to a child, sextortion of children, child sex trafficking, child sexual molestation, child sex tourism, misleading domain names, misleading words, digital images. Essentially, anyone can make a report to NCMEC. So a private citizen could get online or call into NCMEC and report, hey, I saw a conversation happening online between some people in a chat room. It looked like an older adult was talking to a younger child about meeting up to have sex. Or a lot of the reports we get are from various internet service providers like Facebook, Google, Twitter, Snapchat, all of those. They all sort of monitor their servers for any sort of activity that might involve a criminal act involving a juvenile. And they will report that to NCMEC, and then NCMEC will create those cyber tips. So we do get a lot of our enticement cases through our cyber tips, and we get some of our child sex trafficking, tips that way as well. So this just shows how our cyber tips are increasing over the years. There's a variety of reasons for that. Obviously, the fact that mobile devices have become so much more common nowadays than they used to be. Back in 2003, 2004, when we started, the ICAC task force, we had the, brick cell phones or the Nokia cell phones. Those were way different than the types of cell phones that we have access to nowadays. So we think one of the main reasons that increases happen is just because most people have access to some sort of cellular device. Most cellular devices now have access to the internet. So it just makes it easier for people to constantly be online doing things. And then we also see that there's an increased effort of technology companies and the ISPs and ESPs to develop tools to find child sexual abuse material, child enticement, all of those types of things on their platforms. So we are seeing an increase every single year. Unfortunately, since last year when the pandemic hit, we've seen an even larger increase in the number of cyber tips that we're getting. Obvious reason for that is that we have more people that were at home during the pandemic, a lot more kids that were at home all day instead of being at school at least part of the day. They're also doing digital learning. So kids that before might not have had regular access to a computer or a tablet or a phone now have regular access to it because they're doing digital learning. And there's just people that have more time at home to be on their computers versus being in the workplace. So we've seen a huge increase in the number of cyber tips that we're seeing in terms of child sexual abuse material, but really also in our online enticement of children, since they're at home and on their computers a lot more. So these are the common ISPs or ESPs that report to NCMEC. These are the most common ones that we will get reports from also in terms of when they're seeing online enticement of children. Facebook is still one of the, probably still number one in terms of where we're getting a lot of our reports and where we're seeing a lot of that online enticement. Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat. Instagram is where we're seeing, a lot of the teenage population is on Instagram now. So we're getting a lot more reports from them, as well as Snapchat. We also get things from Dropbox, Meet Me. A lot of our kids, for whatever reason, are on things like Meet Me, which is a chat application that allows you to connect with people you know, and as well as people you don't know. So obviously that's going to create an issue when they're able to chat with people they don't know. But you can see all those other ones on here. Kik has always been a huge one in terms of people using it to chat and exchange child sexual abuse material, using it to entice and talk to and communicate with our juveniles. And so, you know, these are just a handful of the ones that we see. We see tons more, but these are just some of the most popular ones that we're seeing. All right, so what is the online sexual exploitation? It most commonly includes things like grooming, live streaming, viewing child sexual abuse material, coercing and blackmailing children for sexual purposes, or what we call sextortion now, and recruitment for trafficking purposes. So never before has it been easier for perpetrators to make contact with children, share images of abuse, hide their identity and profits, and inspire each other to commit further crimes. Obviously, we see this with cases of bullying. People think that they're hiding behind a keyboard. They feel like they're protected or that they're more anonymous. You have to go through a lot in order to, you know, actually be completely anonymous online. People think, oh, I'll make up a fake email address and use that to sign into this account. They'll never know it's me. I'll use a fake name too. Well, people forget that we have, you know, that your IP address is always being tracked. So unless you've got some sort of VPN or other way to anonymize yourself, then we're going to be able to find out who you are. Behind every image, video, or screen, there is a real child victim being sexually exploited. Like other forms of sexual abuse, online abuse can scar victims emotionally and physically for a lifetime. You know, we probably all realize that, but believe it or not, we've had various people, including judges, who look at child sexual abuse material or look at a chat online and think, well, that's not really a child being abused, you know, it's just the image of it. It's just the video of it. It's just a chat. They didn't actually meet up. But how many of us want our children online chatting with someone older about sexual things and being introduced to all kinds of sexual things that they may have not already known about? You know, I certainly don't want that for my children. And if there was an image or a video of my child out there that was, you know, somebody kept passing around, I wouldn't like that either. I don't view that as victimless. The way we view it is child pornography allows the child to be re-victimized millions of times. So every time an image is watched, sent, or received, that child is re-victimized. All right, so looking more specifically at what enticement is. So online enticement involves an individual communicating with someone believed to be a child via the internet with the intent to commit a sexual offense, or potentially an abduction. It's a very broad category of online exploitation and includes sextortion. Sextortion is when a child is being groomed to take sexually explicit images and or meet face-to-face with someone for sexual purposes, or to engage in a sexual conversation online, or in some instances to sell or trade the child's sexual images. We are seeing an insane increase in the amount of sextortion cases that we see coming across our desk. I mean, this is just like, for some reason, this is just like the hot new thing for these predators to do. You know, very often what they're doing is meeting the kids online in various places, building a relationship with them, whether it's pretending to be someone that's their age or someone that's maybe a little bit older, but usually, obviously, they're not telling their actual age. And they are building a relationship with them using those grooming techniques. But they take the conversation sexual pretty early on, and they sort of build that into the relationship as part of the importance of that relationship. So they begin telling them, you know, well, you know, engaging in sexual content or conversation, asking them, hey, what have you done sexually before? Have you ever been with a guy? Have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? Would you like to do that? And, you know, it just sort of grows from there. They have mastered introducing this sex talk to these, you know, underage kids, some of which have never been introduced to sexual talk like this, and some that have. And so they're able to kind of worm their way in, get this person to trust them, build that relationship with them, and then they'll begin that sexual talk with them, and then they'll begin asking for those sexually explicit images or videos. Sometimes the way they do that is by saying, hey, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. Or so they might send a picture of their penis or a picture of them in their underwear or something like that, just to sort of make that child feel a little bit more comfortable with it. And the thing to keep in mind with this is that there are probably 10 kids that get, let's just say, I know the number's probably higher than that, but let's just say there's 10 kids that this one person reaches out with in a day. They might only get to a conversation that's sexually explicit with 1 or 2 of them. But basically what they're doing is throwing out they're casting a large net and seeing which ones hang on. So they're spending time trying to connect with a bunch of different kids. But obviously not all of them are going to latch on. Some of them are going to say, ooh, you're too old for me, or I don't know who you are, I can't talk to you. Or when it starts getting sexually explicit, they might, then they say, oh, I don't want to, be involved in this. But there's going to be those 1 or 2 that are like, they get groomed into it and they continue to participate in it. And then what we're seeing is once they get them into that conversation about sexually explicit stuff, and once they're getting them to send them images and videos, they will begin asking for more stuff, more images, more videos, and trying to tell them exactly what to do in these videos. And it can get pretty raunchy and nasty in some of the things that they're asking them to do. A lot, some of the kids will go along with it and continue to do it. Eventually they're going to get tired of it and they're going to say, no, I don't want to do it anymore. Or when it gets to a certain point where they're not comfortable anymore, they'll start, try and say, hey, no, I don't want to do it anymore. I'm not going to send you anymore. Well, the sextortion part of this is where once that child says, no, I'm not going to send you anymore, then our predator will then say, well, if you're not going to send me anymore, then I'm going to take this image where you showed your boobs or where you showed this, and I'm going to send it to all your friends on Facebook, or I'm going to send it to your mom and dad. I have their email addresses, or I have their Facebook account, or hey, here's all your Instagram friends. I'm going to post the picture so everyone on Instagram can see it. So they start threatening to show the images that they've already sent them, and that's how they kind of lure them into sending more. Sometimes it gets to the point where they start threatening to actually physically harm or kill them, their family members, anything like that. And these predators will do a lot of research and will try and figure out, where these kids live, where they go to school, who their family members are. And sometimes that's not that hard to do because kids will put a lot of this information out there on the internet, whether it's in a Facebook account, an Instagram account, like on Facebook, you can list who your family members are. So if you do that, it's not really hard to go see who your mom or who your dad is. Sometimes they'll actually post where they go to school, or they might post a picture of them out in front of the school, or post a picture of them at a football game, things like that. Those are things that they're not thinking about when they're posting those pictures online, is that somebody might eventually see this picture that I don't know and they'll figure out where I go to school. Or I might post a picture of me in front of my house and they know I live in this general vicinity. Well, do a little bit of research. You can probably figure out where that house actually is. And again, these are things that these kids are not thinking about when they're posting these pictures or when they're giving out this information. And so it's not really hard for some of these predators to figure these things out or to get this information from these kids in order to continue to sextort them. This obviously enticement takes place across every platform to include social media, messaging apps, and gaming platforms. Basically, if there's a child on that platform, there's a predator waiting or attempting to make contact. If I'm a person that's interested in children, I'm going to find whatever platform I can where kids, usually are. So if that's Instagram or Snapchat, I'm going to get on there. If I want, if I'm looking for an even younger group of kids that I'm interested in, I might get on the gaming platforms like PlayStation or Xbox. We see a lot of our much younger children, as young as 7, 8, 9 years old, that are on here where they're communicating with people through these games to play these games, and that's how they're meeting some of these predators who are then getting them to communicate with them in other ways, like going to Meet Me or WhatsApp to chat, or even giving out phone numbers to exchange text messages. So most common tactics used to entice, engaging in sexual conversation or role playing as a grooming method rather than a goal. So they're introducing that sexual conversation or that role playing about sex very early on in the conversation because that is what they're interested in. And it's sort of their way of grooming. They want to introduce that early on so that that becomes part of the conversation, and that's what they want to talk about. So they're not going to spend months talking to someone about, oh, you know, how's your dog today? How was school? Things like that. They're going to introduce that sex conversation early on to find out, hey, is this child even going to be interested in having sexual conversations with me? If they're not, they want to be able to move on to the next one. They're not going to spend a lot of time engaging in that conversation if they can't get it to go sexual in nature very early on. They're going to obviously start asking the child for sexually explicit images of themselves. They may mutually share images. You know, obviously, most of these predators are pretty smart in that they won't send pictures of their face. And, you know, usually it's just pictures of their parts, but some of them are really dumb and they do actually send pictures of their faces. They will develop a rapport through compliments, discussing shared interests, or liking their online posts, which is also known as grooming. These are all sort of things that, you know, we view as online grooming, which looks similar to some of the grooming that you see in child molestation cases, but it's a little bit different because it involves the internet and being online. Again, sending or offering sexually explicit images of themselves, pretending to be younger, or offering an incentive such as a gift card, alcohol, drugs, lodging, transportation, or food. We will see where they will actually offer to give them, either send them money on like Venmo or Cash App, or they might send them money through PlayStation or something to play a game. Just anything that they think the kid might be interested in, they might offer to send them, you know, a little bit of money or that gift card early on to get them to send a sexually explicit image. Once the child does that, even though they got some money or they got that gift card, they've now sent a sexually explicit image to a predator who's then going to probably use that against them. So what is recruitment? What does that look like? So, you know, previously when we first started really talking about human trafficking and child sex trafficking, you know, we thought runaways were sort of, and they were the biggest target because they're the ones that might be at a bus station or hanging out on the corner at a gas station or don't have anywhere to go. And that's really how the trafficking was starting out, and that's how they were meeting their traffickers a lot, you know, some of the time. With the internet, it actually makes it a lot easier for these traffickers to actually recruit their victims. Because obviously it just gives them a way to reach out to them through the internet. Sort of like enticement, they're going to cast that wide net out there to a bunch of victims that they think are potential victims that they might think might be interested. But you know, they might start communicating with 10 of them, and again, 1, 2, or 3 of them might actually stay engaged in the conversation, whereas 7 or 8 of them say, no, I'm not interested. So again, they're going to put that, you know, that net out there and see who latches onto it. So obviously they're using the internet as a way to target unsuspecting and vulnerable youth for their own personal financial gain, as targets are seen as nothing more than a dollar sign. Much like grooming tactics employed by sexual predators, sex traffickers lure their target into an online relationship with the ultimate goal of meeting in person. And traffickers use a deliberate process to identify and recruit their victims. So the 3 main phases are scouting, which is obviously them online looking at who they think might be interested, who they think they might get interested. Then they will go into the manipulating phase and then the trapping phase. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those because I know that those have sort of been, you know, that sort of 101 and how that looks. Obviously, the types of targets they're looking for, ones that are vulnerable, ones that maybe don't have a great home life or have experienced some sort of abuse, whether it's sexual or physical in the past, ones that have run away previously or who live in foster homes or group homes. Those are the types. And obviously with the manipulating, that's when they might shower them with compliments, shower them with gifts, tell them, hey, I can take care of you, I can help you, I can get you out of that home life that that you hate, that's not good for you. And then obviously they will trap them at that point and start trafficking them. Sometimes, like you guys probably know this, but they will hold their papers if they have any. They will sometimes use physical violence as a way to get them to stay and that sort of thing. So in talking about enticement versus recruitment, what is this? Why, how do these differ? How they look the same? So they both obviously use various online platforms to make contact with their victims. We see a lot of the same social media platforms being used by those that are looking to entice and those are looking to recruit for trafficking purposes. So we don't really see a ton of differences there in how they're making contact with their victims, because again, where the kids are is where both of these types of predators are going to be. They both use grooming techniques to build trust in relationships with their victims. But those grooming techniques look a little bit different between the two. So the main difference is the end goal differs for each one. So what is the goal when they're trying to entice for sexual purposes versus when they're trying to recruit for trafficking purposes? So those looking to entice online are usually looking to have sexual conversations, exchange of sexually explicit images and videos, and sometimes they do want to meet in person for sex. But generally, if they're wanting to meet them in person for sex, they're not looking to try to then start trafficking them. They're actually just looking to meet up with them to have sex with them themselves. Very often, sexually explicit conversations and requests for sexually explicit images, videos, both will start very early on in the conversations. I already kind of talked about that. However, those looking to recruit see their victims as a way to make money by way of sex trafficking. They will generally spend more time talking with the victim online, building a relationship with them, and don't necessarily focus on the sexual conversations. They spend their time making their victim believe they are in a real relationship and they're going to save them from their current life. So not saying that traffickers that are recruiting don't bring up sexual things in conversations, but generally speaking, that's not going to be the main goal or the main focus of their conversation. If they bring up sexual acts or sexual conversation, it's going to be more like, hey, we can be in a relationship. We can have a sexual relationship, me and you. I can take care of you. I can show you, what a real relationship looks like. They're trying to build that relationship with them to get them to trust them enough to come meet them in person. So traffickers are always wanting to get the child to meet them in person. Obviously, I mean, how else do you traffic them if you don't get them to meet you in person at some point? But those who are enticing without the intent of trafficking are not always looking to meet up with the person. We do see that quite a bit where they're talking to them and then they try to meet up with them to have sex. But we also see quite a few of those cases where they never mention meeting up. They're simply just trying to get sexually explicit images and videos from that victim. All right, so quick, some case studies here. So what does online enticement that leads to child abduction look like? You guys probably are aware of this case. Alicia, I never can say her last name correctly. She actually came and spoke at the Georgia ICAC banquet that we had last December and told her story. And she also travels all around the state telling her story and has enacted some legislation in a lot of different states as well. But she's actually one of the first known case of online enticement using the internet. She had begun chatting online and met a guy she thought was her age. She, quote, says, "There was one guy, boy, who I thought was around my own age that I didn't know, and he was into all the same things that I was into. He listened to what I had to say day and night, giving me advice. He was somebody to complain to and to get comforted by over the 8 or 9 months before my abduction." So he spent 8 or 9 months talking to her just about various things. She says that there was never much of a sexual conversation during any of that time. It was just more, her really talking a lot about her life and him being comforting and giving her advice. December 31st, 2001, she was 13 years old. She went missing from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania after having dinner with her family. She snuck out of the house after telling her mother that she had a stomach ache and she had gone to lay down. When she went outside to meet the boy she thought was her age, she actually ended up being forced into a truck with a guy that she'd never seen before. She actually talks about how she got a little weirded out when she was out there and actually had turned around after she saw the truck to walk back to her house, but then he grabbed her and forced her into the truck. 4 days later, she was rescued in the house of Scott Tyree in Herndon, Virginia, after an anonymous tip was received from a man in Florida who had seen Tyree broadcasting his abuse of Alicia online. So he had started, over those 4 days, had done all kinds of sexual abuse directed at her. He had been broadcasting it online, and this man in Florida had actually seen it, called in an anonymous tip, and that's how they were actually led to Alicia. In 2003, Scott Tyree pleaded guilty to taking a minor across state lines for the purpose of sex and producing sexually explicit images. He was sentenced to 19 years and 7 months in prison. So what does a sextortion case look like? So this report actually came when a mom noticed some chat conversations and images and videos on her child's phone. So she reported it to local law enforcement. They downloaded the victim's phone, revealed chats and images and videos. Essentially, this guy over here on the right in the orange shirt had started communicating with the victim through Xbox. And he started requesting videos or pictures of the victim urinating and defecating in exchange for money. So he was sending the victim money through Xbox in exchange for these videos and images. The perpetrator's screen name was C-Money. Did an intelligence check on him, ended up finding out that it was Clarence Andrews, who was also a sex offender at the time in Maryland. These are some of the chats between them on Xbox, where they're just kind of discussing. He's telling him, you know, asking him, do you have the video ready? And he tells him, hey, why don't you do it in the bathroom so you don't get in trouble? The victim says, yeah, I'll tell my parents that I got to go to the bathroom. He gives him some further direction on what he actually wants him to do and all of that. They get to the point in the conversation where the victim starts saying he basically doesn't want to send any more of these videos to him. And, you know, the guy starts saying, well, if you're not going to do it, I'm not going to send you any more money. And they kind of go back and forth on that. Then the victim starts talking about how he's a Christian. He tells the truth. He should have told the truth earlier on, that kind of thing. And then our sex offender, who has been requesting these videos from our victim, starts talking about how lying's a sin. In the Bible, in the 10 Commandments, says, thou shalt not lie. So I think it's funny he forgets that, you know, might not be in the 10 Commandments, but we shouldn't be communicating sexually with underage children either. That's a pretty big sin as well. So a lot that just goes on to that. End up doing some search warrants, things like that. They find images of a folder in his photos on his phone containing child pornography images. They take the case federal. They identify 8 additional victims that he had been doing something similar to. He ends up pleading to 1 count of production of child pornography. He got 25 years and a lifetime supervised release. And here's a sex trafficking case. This one actually started out as a cyber tip from NCMEC, in which Facebook reported a user named David Ingram for uploading and sending CSAM. The recipient of the content was a 16-year-old female. Get a search warrant for the Facebook account and the contents of it. And going through those records, David Ingram was using his actual real name and real pictures in this account. It's also discovered that he was using Facebook to run an underground porn business with juveniles and adult females. He'd been having sexually explicit conversations with the 16-year-old recipient of that CSAM. He had eventually started meeting the 16-year-old victim in person, and they were having sex. He then began trafficking her by allowing other men to pay for various sexual encounters with her. So these conversations through Facebook Messenger shows him telling her, hey, I've got Jordan lined up for this day. What are you willing to do with him? Hey, are you okay doing a threesome? Those sorts of things. Also found where he was using Facebook to communicate with other females as well. Some of them were underage. Some of them were over the age of 18 to, again, communicate with them about basically trafficking them. So these are some of the things we found in the Facebook records, where he was communicating, telling our 16-year-old victim what kind of things he liked to see her do. Here at the bottom, it talks about Ingram asked if Cox wanted to have 2 guys, one in the afternoon and one at night, or just one. Her choices were to have the Army guy, Daniel, the big cock guy, or Harlan. Cox stated that she wanted to have Jordan on Friday night and only wanted 1 guy for Saturday. She said, Jordan broke me last time, remember? Ingram stated that he would arrange for Harlan on Saturday because he is smaller. So essentially, like I said, he's using Facebook to communicate with her and set up dates for her, as well as traveling to meet her for sex himself. These are some more chats involving some other victims as well. All right, so that is the end my presentation.
Thanks so much for that. And I know that's likely a couple of questions. So I know, of course, the content might be a bit difficult to kind of hear. And oftentimes we want to make sure that folks are aware of resources and able to kind of connect with us afterwards, especially if you have follow-up questions. But always want to kind of put the disclaimer that, of course, we know all of us working within the field that the content can be especially heavy. So we appreciate, April, you rolling through those case studies. We know how important it is to really make sure that we've got some tangible examples to really know what this looks like online. And so we can better, of course, identify and then work within our resources and our networks to make sure that we're providing victim resources and successful investigations as well as prosecutions. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to open up the chat. And for those of you that do have questions for April, April, if you'd like, you can stop sharing your screen because I think we're seeing a double view of the teams right now. So if you'd like to stop sharing, it might be, yep, it's great. So for anybody that has questions, please feel free to utilize the chat option at this time. We will kind of roll through them. I'll lean on Alina to kind of monitor that chat and ask those questions out loud. For those of you that have anything that you would like to ask Special Agent Griffith at this time. And we did promise that we were going to be about 50 minutes. And we have about 7 minutes until we will sign off. So please use the next 7 minutes or so to use this time for Q&A if you have anything. Now give folks a little bit of time. You might be typing.
All right, Erica, we have a question.
Great.
It says, is there data on the characteristics of the offenders, sex, age, race, etc.?
All right. So there is data out there. Really, in terms of what we're seeing with online enticement, we're seeing the gamut of, in terms of age and race and socioeconomic status. I mean, we're not seeing that there's any sort of like one particular type of person that's more likely to entice online. And really similar with trafficking as well. Obviously, the vast majority of them are male. That's the one thing we can say without a doubt, is that the vast majority of them are male. And generally speaking, when we see females involved, they're usually, not all of them, but most of them are usually working with a male in some capacity. So unfortunately for you guys, that's the vast majority of our offenders is going to be males. And on the enticement side, we do see a slight increase in white males that are actually more involved in that. And when we're talking about child sexual abuse material being uploaded, traded, that sort of thing, at least in the cases we work, the vast majority of those are white males as well. But again, we're not seeing, we're not always seeing it's the guy that's in his mom's basement. We're seeing a variety of people that are involved in these types of things.
I have another question for you, April.
Okay.
It says, I work with foster parents, biological parents, and children in foster care. Do you have any resources or suggestions on how to educate this at-risk population?
Yeah, so those, one of the things, let me make sure I get the website correct because they have actually changed it recently. It, I believe, is, it used to be, it's called NetSmart. That used to be the actual website for it. But there's actually, it's on missingkids.org now. So if you go to missingkids.org, there is a way to look up NetSmarts, NETSMARTZ. And that actually has a variety of internet safety presentations that we use when we go into schools, when we work with, any sort of juvenile population. And the good thing about those those presentations is they break them up based on age groups. So there'll be one for a younger age, like elementary school. There'll be some for middle school, then some for high school. Obviously, we don't want to tell the same things that we tell our high schoolers to our, kindergartners, but they kind of break it down and make it easy for like a kindergartner to understand those presentations. But then when you come, if you're talking to someone that's in middle school or high school, it gives a little bit more information on that. Those are really great presentations to use as either to physically use the presentation or use as a guide when you are talking to some of those kids.
Perfect. And we do have time for just one more question. Is there somewhere we can access the information or statistics that you shared today in your presentation?
So they come from a couple different places. Some of the information I got, again, was from missingkids.org. Some of the information about recruitment, as well as online enticement. Missingkids.org is actually run by NCMEC, but it's a really good resource in general to be able to go to and find a variety of information, any sort of kind of sexual exploitation of children information you might want. They have, as well as statistics and things like that. So that's definitely where I would direct you for that sort of information.
And I would say just a follow up on Special Agent Griffith's comment. I actually just was on a call with some counterparts from across the country yesterday, and we actually had a presentation hosted by NCMEC. And so they've actually just released a ton of new resources and new data on runaways just within the last year, and how that directly correlates, of course, as we all know, directly with trafficking, those runaways looking for safe families or safe, identified people in their lives that, of course, end up taking advantage of them and exploiting their situation. So if you have not recently taken a look at NCMEC's website, I encourage you to, because they have really kind of ramped up a lot of their online resources. So that might be a good way to kind of identify some of that as well. So I know that we are almost at time. And again, these are not meant to kind of be like lengthy presentations, just a really kind of a quick, and while you're eating a sandwich in front of your computer, a way to connect with those of us that are working in the field and have a brief opportunity to ask some of those questions. So for those of you that do kind of have outstanding questions, if you would like, please feel free to email me directly, and I am happy to pass that along to Special Agent Griffith. And April, just kind of whenever you have time to kind of answer or help fill those questions, I'm happy to help facilitate that if you would like.
I also put my email address in the chat. So
perfect. Yep, and April's that's great. April, for those of you that do have those outstanding questions, please feel free to kind of connect with Special Agent Griffith directly as well. So thank you guys so much. Again, this is our first one, kind of our inaugural first Lunch and Learn. So of course, we're still going to be growing and learning what we can kind of take away from this. And we know that everybody is busy. That's why we try to keep it at 1 hour. So we're not intruding all the other meetings and various opportunities that you have to work with partners throughout your day. But just a way for us all to stay connected and make sure that we are, again, working on the same page and having the opportunity to network. So really just want to thank you, April, for all the work that you all do within the GBI, within ICAC, but specifically for being with us here today and providing all this wonderful information and these new up-to-date statistics, as well as providing us with those tangible examples from some of those case studies. So thank you guys so much. Just one kind of quick sign off before we adjourn. We do have our upcoming Human Trafficking Task Force quarterly meeting next Wednesday, September the 1st from 1 to 3 p.m. via Teams. So again, we'll be in the same platform as we are right now. Just really wanting to make sure that we stay safe and mindful of COVID and really trying to make sure that we're doing the best that we can to protect ourselves as well as you all as partners and stakeholders. So if you have any interest in attending that quarterly meeting, we have sent the invitation out to all of the statewide task force, I believe, as well as the coalition. But if you're still interested and have not received that link yet, please just let me know, and I'm happy to forward you that to share amongst your professional networks as well. So I think that's it for us. April, again, thank you so much. It's good to see you again. And if you need anything from us on our end, please let us know. For those of you that have been in attendance today, please do remember that we will be sending you that brief survey. I believe it's only a few questions, so if you could just take a moment just to kind of help us know how today went, how we can improve. And we will make sure to kind of take in that information and help to make all the future Lunch and Learns better. The next Lunch and Learn that we will be having, the date is to be determined, but we will be taking a deep dive and kind of a deeper look at familial trafficking and how that specifically affects our victims here in Georgia. So thank you guys so much. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday and a happy Labor Day weekend if I do not see you before. And that's it for us. So thank you guys. Take care.
Bye.